Hi everybody, this is Miss Holden here, and I am going to do a review for the third quarter. You're going to take a quarterly exam on Friday, so you're going to have Friday and Monday to do it. It will all be on Delta Math. As you know, Delta Math shows you an example of each question before you do it if you want to. You can look at that. So if you come across a question that's hard, then just click Show Example. They'll show you a similar example with different numbers. Use your notes, of course, while you're taking this. And I don't want you to be stressed about the quarterly. It's really just going to count as a small quiz, and it will benefit those of you who are missing something or who have low grades on something. We can use it to replace that missing zero or that missing low grade, so this can really just benefit you guys. So some of the things that we did this quarter was trig, and most of you did great on trig. So just a quick little review. SOHCAHTOA is the way we remember which trig function we're going to use. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. The other thing with trig is the sine of A equals a cosine of B if A plus B equals 90. So if you guys haven't tried this review sheet already, you might want to stop the video and try it on your own. And then I also have the answer sheet that you can look at on the website. And you can really you can fast forward the video to just watch the ones that you had trouble on. You can watch the whole thing. You can rewind it if there's something that you didn't understand. This first one I'm using trig because I have a right triangle and I'm trying to find angle A. So I do recommend that you guys label the sides. The hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, so this 14 is the hypotenuse. And the 9 is adjacent because it's next to the angle that I'm referencing. I'm referencing this angle A. So since I have adjacent and hypotenuse, I'm going to use cosine. Cosine of A equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Cosine of A equals 9 over 14. Now, when you don't have the angle, when the angle is the thing that you're trying to find, that's when you're going to do the inverse. So A equals cosine negative 1, parentheses 9 divided by 14. Just to remind you guys how to do that in your calculator. All right, you can download a calculator. There's a link off the website, or if you just want to use your phone, that would be fine also. You have to make sure that you're in degree mode. So I do that by hitting mode, and mine is in degree mode. So I hit second, and then cosine. A parenthesis will pop up automatically, and then I'm just doing 9 divided by 14. And I hit enter. Oops. Hit enter right there, and there I go. My answer is 49.9 or 50 degrees. Okay, so that's question 1. Question 2 is also a trig question, but this time they give me the angle and I'm missing a side. It is cosine again because based on this angle of 40, I have adjacent and I have hypotenuse. All right, so cosine of 40 equals 14 over x. I put a 1 under here and I cross multiply, and I get cosine of 40 times x equals 14. And to solve for x, I'm just going to divide by cosine of 40. So I divide 14 divided by cosine of 40, and that's 18.27. And this next one is sine of 2x plus 5 equals a cosine of 5x minus 6. What's the value of x? Remember the rule, the cosine of A equals the sine of B, or the sine of A equals a cosine of B. It doesn't really matter which way that you write this, only if A plus B equals 90. I just want to show you that this is my A. The 5x minus 6 is my A, and the 2x plus 5 is my B, and what's true is that A plus B equals 90. So I add them and I set them equal to each other and I solve for x. Okay? All of your area and volume formulas are on the reference sheet. So if you don't still have a reference sheet from class, you can certainly just Google Geometry Common Core reference sheet and you can pull it right up and you can use that as you're doing these problems. The thing that's not on the reference sheet is density. Density is mass over volume, but you can use your notes for the test so you don't have to memorize anything at all. And the other thing is cross-section. A cross-section is like a slice that's taken of a figure. If you take that cross-section parallel to the base, then it's always going to be whatever shape the base is. And if you take it perpendicular to the base, you sort of have to imagine what the sides would be like. So let's look at 4. If I do a cross-section of a cone, think of an ice cream cone. I drew a cone right here. If it's parallel to the base, then it's going to be whatever shape the base is. The cross-section will be a circle. Now, depending on where you take that cross-section, the circle will have a different size. A cross section taken towards the bottom would be a bigger circle versus a cross section taken towards the top. And if I do a cross section perpendicular to the base, so imagine that I'm doing cross section this way, up and down, okay? And you sort of split the cone in half and open it towards you. There's a triangle shape that's facing you, all right? So that cross section is a triangle. Cross section of a square pyramid that's parallel to the base was going to be whatever shape the base is. My base is a square, so it will be a square. And the sides of a pyramid are triangles. So if I take a cross section that's perpendicular up and down to the base, then the cross section will be a triangle. A sphere is like a soccer ball, basketball, globe. Any kind of cross section will be a circle. There'll be different size circles, but they will be a circle. All right, next page that we're looking at, volume of a cone. Looking at my formula sheet, the volume is 1/3 pi r squared h. So the height is 12, so I'm putting in 12 for the height. And the diameter is 6. That means my radius is 3, so I'm putting in 3 for the radius. Now this question says that they want your answer in terms of pi. So I'm going to multiply everything that's here, but I'm not going to put the pi in my calculator. And when I do that, so 1/3 times 3 squared times 12, my answer is 36 pi, and that's my answer. Another thing that we talked about was rotating a figure. So if I take this two-dimensional rectangle here and I rotate it, I spin it around this line, I would get a cone as a three-dimensional figure. So that's not a cone, I'm so sorry, a cylinder. All right, if I had a triangle and I rotated it, that would be a cone. If I have a rectangle and rotate it, though, I'm going to get a cylinder. And then I want to find the volume of that cylinder. The formula for volume of a cylinder is pi r squared h. So my radius is 3 right here, and my height is 5. And I didn't say how to round this off, so 45 pi would be fine. Most of the time, they'll ask you to round it to the nearest tenth, and that would be 141.4. A sphere, again, the formula is on your reference sheet, is 4/3 pi r cubed. Please make sure that you're doing pi r cubed. A lot of people do pi r squared because they're used to that with area, but this is 4/3 pi r cubed. If the diameter of my sphere is 16, then that means my radius is 8. The radius is just half of the diameter. So all I'm doing is plugging this in. I'm putting it right into my calculator. 4/3 times pi times 8 cubed. And I get 2,145 because they're asking me to round that to the nearest whole number. Pyramid, volume of a pyramid is 1/3 BH. Now this capital B stands for area of the base. Okay, so when I have a pyramid, I have to, or any figure really, I'm always concerned about what the shape the base is. All right, so right here, this is my base. I want to find the area of the base. Well, they already told me that my base is a square. A square has all sides are congruent. So it has a square base with sides lengths of 12. So to find that area of the base, I did 12 times 12. All right, and that's what I substituted in right here. So this 12 times 12 comes from the area of the base when the base is a square. So it's 1/3, 12 times 12, that's the area of the square, times the height. The height is 18. And all that goes in my calculator, and my volume is 864 feet cubed. Okay. Next one I have is a little density problem. Density is mass over volume. So in this particular problem, I have the mass. The mass is how much it weighs. That's 3.2 pounds. So I'm just substituting in 3.2 for the mass. The problem is I didn't have the volume. I know the dimensions of this brick. It's 8 times 2 times 3. So that's just a rectangular solid. So all I did was multiply 8 times 2 times 3, and that's the volume. And my density is just mass over volume. So I just divide that, and that's my answer right there. That keeps on repeating. The other thing that we did is we did parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel and perpendicular lines and writing equations. So slope, you should know. Slope is change in y over change in x. Now, if my lines are parallel, they have the same slope. So anytime they mention parallel lines, you're looking for something with the same slope. If they tell you your lines are perpendicular, then that's your slopes are negative reciprocals. Negative reciprocal means you're going to flip it. That's what reciprocal means. Just flip it upside down. And negative means you're going to negate it. So if it's positive, you're going to make it negative. If it's negative, you're going to make it positive. The equation of a line that you used to do back in algebra in slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. But what we generally do in geometry is we use our point-slope form. That's y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. So basically you need a slope, that's your m, and you need 1 point, that's your x1, y1. First equation, they want an equation of a line that's perpendicular to this equation y equals x minus 2. Now, perpendicular lines, we learn that the slopes are negative reciprocals. So I look at this equation right here, y equals x minus 2, and I want to find the slope. The slope is the number next to the x, so my slope is 1. My perpendicular slope means I'm going to flip that. When I flip 1, it's just 1 still, but I'm also going to negate it. It's a negative reciprocal, so my slope is negative 1. At that point, you would take the slope and you would take the point and you can plug it into this equation right here. You don't actually have to do that for this problem though, because there's only one choice that has the right slope. Choice B is the only one that has a slope of negative 1, so that has to be your answer. But if I was to plug this in and simplify, I would get choice B. Now the second part of this question I will have to do out because there is no multiple choice, but I'm going to use that same line, y equals x minus 2, but this time I want a line that's parallel. Well, parallel lines have the same slope. So the slope I'm going to use is m equals 1, and I'm using that same point, 2, negative 1. So 2 is my x1, negative 1 is my y1. So y minus negative 1, I got that from right here, and a minus negative 1 becomes a plus 1, equals m, my slope is 1, parentheses x minus 2. And that's my answer. I can leave it just like that. I don't have to do anything. The only thing I probably would do is clean up this minus negative 1 and make it a plus 1. Okay? Next page, doing some more with lines. So 13, I want to know about these two lines. Are they parallel, perpendicular, collinear? Collinear means they're the exact same line, so they have the same slope and the same y-intercept. Intersecting but not perpendicular. That's actually the answer right here. Right? I didn't mean to circle perpendicular. I just wanted to point out that if they're parallel, they have the same slope. If they're perpendicular, their slopes are negative reciprocals. So all I did was I took each equation and I got y by itself so I can find the slope. So this first one, I brought x to the right and it becomes positive x. I divide everything by 3. So this slope is 1/3. This next one, I distribute that 3 to everything in the parentheses and it becomes 3x minus 3. And I subtract this 3, so it's y equals 3x minus 6. This has a slope of 3. Now they are reciprocals, so you might think they're perpendicular, but they are not negative reciprocals. So they are just intersecting lines, the two lines that cross. They have different slopes, but they are not perpendicular to each other. And what we were doing in this last unit is applications of distance. So we have our distance formula that's used to find the length of something. I use that if I want to prove that segments are congruent. And there's my distance formula, square root x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Midpoint, that's the point in the middle. And think of your midpoint as your average. You're just adding the x's, dividing by 2, adding the y's, dividing by 2. Partitioning, you might see, it might say partition, it might say dividing a segment, x1 plus a over b, parentheses x2 minus x1, and then y1 plus a over b, y2 minus y1. A perpendicular bisector sort of puts together all of this with writing an equation. You have to find the midpoint, you have to find the slope, then you're going to take the negative reciprocal of the slope, and then you're going to write an equation with that midpoint and with that negative reciprocal. So there's a few for us to practice here. 14 wants to know what's the distance. So anything that says distance or length, you're using your distance formula. If it helps you to label these x1, y1, x2, y2, then great. So square root 5 minus 2 squared plus 7 minus negative 3 squared. This can all go into your calculator if you wanted to. I just simplified it a little first. 5 minus 2, I could just do that in my head, is 3. 3 squared is 9. 7 minus negative 3 is actually 10, and 10 squared is 100. So this is the square root of 109, and I can leave it just like that. Next one is a midpoint formula, which is definitely easier than distance. Midpoint is the point in the middle, so I add the x's, divide by 2, add the y's, divide by 2. My answer is an actual point. It has parentheses around it, and it has a comma in between. 16 is a partitioning question. It says I'm going to divide. Now, the only thing with partitioning, sometimes they give you the fraction, that a over b, like they tell you it's 3/5. Sometimes they give you a ratio. So in this particular problem, they said I'm dividing the two segments with a ratio of a 3:2 ratio. That means the 3 goes on top. I have to convert this to a fraction. This first number 3 goes on top. And how did I get the 5? I just added 3 plus 2 is 5. Because basically, if you were dividing into a 3:2 ratio, you have 5 parts total. So that's the denominator of your fraction. Again, it's just x1, so that's negative 2, plus a over b, that's 3/5, parentheses, x2 minus x1, 8 minus negative 2. But you can do that all in your calculator. So if you do this all in your calculator with the parentheses and everything, you get 4. And then you're going to do all of the y's in your calculator, and you'll get 5. But it's y1, which is 8, plus 3/5, parentheses, 3 minus 8. Again, I did that all in my calculator, and I got 5 as an answer. And 17, that's the one that you put together a lot of these concepts, an equation of the perpendicular bisector. So bisector means a point in the middle, so you have to find the midpoint. So you use your midpoint formula with point A and point B, and I get a midpoint of negative 4, 2. I use my slope formula. I'm trying to find the slope of AB. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 gives me negative 6 over negative 4, which is 3/2. Now it's perpendicular, so I don't want a slope of 3/2. I have to flip it and change the sign. So my slope is going to be negative 2/3. And then I finally write the equation. So using this midpoint and this slope, that's what I'm using to plug in to write my equation. So again, I'm using the midpoint, which is right here, and I'm using my slope, which is right here, and that's what I'm plugging in. So this is my midpoint, my x1 and my y1, and this is my slope. So those three things were plugged in, and that's your answer. You do not need to simplify it unless it was like multiple choice and it was simplified in the choices for you. 18 is a midpoint problem, but it's a little different because they're giving you the midpoint. I'm telling you the midpoint is 6, 4. So I draw myself like a little number line. I put the midpoint in the middle. Point A is 9, negative 2. Now if 6, 4 is a midpoint, however far away it is from A, it has to be the same exact distance from B. Okay, so all I did is I compare the x's. How far away is it from A? How did I get from 9 to 6? Well, I subtracted 3. How did I get from negative 2 to positive 4? I added 6. So I do the same exact thing on this side to figure out B. I'm going to subtract 3 from the x. 6 minus 3 is 3. And I'm going to add 6 to the y. 4 plus 6 is 10. Okay, we got one more page to do. So here are just some properties of parallelograms. Basically, with parallelograms, the opposite angles are congruent. So I have angle A, which is right here, 4x plus 2. I have angle C, which is right here, 2x plus 20. Those are opposite angles. They're congruent. So all I did was set them equal to each other and solve for x. So I subtract 2x and I get 2x. I subtracted 2 from 20 and I got 18. I then divide by 2 and I get x equals 9. Now, if I plug in 9 for angle A, 4 times 9 plus 2 is 38. I actually want, though, angle ABC. Angle ABC is right here. Angle A and angle B, or ABC, those are supplementary. So angles that are next to each other equal 180. So once I know that angle A is 38, all I do to find angle B or angle ABC is 180 minus 38, and that's how I got the 142. Another thing about parallelograms is that the diagonals bisect each other. So AE right here, which is 5x minus 10, so that's AE right here, 5x minus 10. And EC is 3x plus 6. So EC is 3x plus 6, so that's from here. So those bisect each other, so that makes these two segments equal to each other. So AE is equal to EC. So 5x minus 2 equals 3x plus 6. I subtract 3x to get 2x. I add 10 to the 6 to get 16. X is 8. And then they want me to find AC. They want the length of this whole line. So all I did is I found AE. AE is 5 times x, which now I know x is 8, minus 10. 5 times 8 is 40, minus 10 is 30. But I want AC, which is 2 times AE. 2 times 30 is 60. Okay, and then this last one, I want to prove that ABCD is a parallelogram. To prove something's a parallelogram, both opposite sides are parallel. That means that they have the same slope. So you are doing slope 4 times. I find the slope of AB, right? Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. That comes out to -1. I find the slope, I'm going to skip. I find the slope of CD. So now I'm using point CD. -2 minus -6, -4 minus 0. I skip because I want to show you guys that these have the same exact slope, and they should, because in a parallelogram, opposite sides are parallel. And then slope BC, I'm doing -6 minus -3 and 0 minus 3. So that's BC. And that slope comes out to be 1. Okay, so this comes out to be 1. And slope AD is going to be -2 minus 1 over -4 minus -1. -3 over -3 again is a 1. So since both opposite sides have the same slope, they are parallel, and ABCD is a parallelogram. And with that, I also know that ABCD is a rectangle, because if you look at AB and BC, I don't have to do any more work for this, I just need an explanation. AB and BC, the slopes are negative reciprocals, right? -1 and +1, they're negative reciprocals. Since they're negative reciprocals, that means the lines are perpendicular. If they're perpendicular, that makes it a right angle. Therefore, ABC is a rectangle. Okay, so again, your quarterly exam, which is informal, it's just like a short little quiz classwork assignment, is on Delta Math, but please do it. Okay, it will count for as a quiz. And if you're missing something and you have a 0 or you have a low grade, then we can use that to replace that low grade to help bring up your average for the third quarter. Alrighty, and that's about it.